Coming up today, meeting with U.S. Defense Chief Ashton Carter at the Pentagon. President Park Geun-hye hails the strength of the South Korea-U.S. alliance. The United States says no to the transfer of 4 core technologies necessary for Korea's KF-X fighter jet project. Plus, Volkswagen is ordered to recall 8.5 million cars in Europe over its emissions cheat switch scandal. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Friday, the 16th of October. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this afternoon. President Park Geun-hye, on her 3rd day in Washington, has paid a visit to the Pentagon for the first time. There, she reaffirmed the strong military ties between South Korea and the United States and pledged to further expand their cooperation. Our Hwang Sang-hee reports from Washington.
Korea, thanks you. We go together.
That was President Park's key message during her visit to the Pentagon on Thursday. During her talks with U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter, President Park called for expanded cooperation in cybersecurity and space in their joint efforts to counter North Korean threats. Saying the U.S. commitment to South Korea is as firm as steel, Carter said he expected Seoul and Washington to closely cooperate in dealing with North Korea's provocations in the future. The meeting comes amid concerns of a possible long-range rocket launch by North Korea. President Park also met with South Korean and American soldiers, calling them the core of their strong alliance.
한미 장병 여러분들이 어깨를 나란히 하고 같이 근무하는 모습을 보면서 또 자유의 최전선에 함께 서 있는 여러분들이야말로 한미 동맹의 심장이라고 생각을 했었습니다.
Following her visit to the Pentagon, President Park held a luncheon meeting with U.S. Vice President Joe Biden at the Naval Observatory. The two reaffirmed the South Korea-U.S. alliance and agreed to further strengthen their bilateral cooperation on both regional and global issues. President Park also met with U.S. officials and academics at the Center for Strategic and International Studies to explain South Korea's diplomatic policies. She will wrap up her 4-day visit on Friday by holding a summit with U.S. President Barack Obama. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News, Washington.
And President Park Geun-hye has hinted at a possible summit with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in the coming weeks at a Q&A session following her speech at the Center for Strategic and International Studies Forum. The South Korean leader said she hopes the upcoming trilateral summit with Japan and China will serve as an opportunity to mend Seoul-Tokyo relations.
이번 한일종 정상회의를 계기로 한일 양국 관계를 가로막고 있는 장애물을 제거하고 미래 지향적 발전 방향을 깊이 논의할 수 있기를 바라고 있습니다.
On the sidelines of that summit, slated for sometime in late October or early November, President Park said she could hold her first summit with Abe, as we just heard, saying it would be meaningful if progress is made on the issue of Japan's sexual enslavement of Korean women before and during World War II. The two leaders have yet to hold a summit as bilateral relations remain at a historic low due to Japan's denial of its wartime atrocities. And staying in Washington, President Park also attended a meeting of South Korean and American business leaders and called for increased cooperation to improve their bilateral trade relations. In a speech, she proposed strengthening the South Korea-U.S. free trade deal and creating an environment to accommodate investors. President Park noted the need for close cooperation between Seoul and Washington amid the expansion of so-called mega FTAs like the Trans-Pacific Partnership or TPP. She added that South Korea joining the TPP would benefit businesses in both countries, considering Seoul's trade pacts with giant economies like the European Union and China. Now, the South Korea-U.S. summit is expected to cover a broad range of issues, including the economy, security and also pending international issues. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest told reporters that President Park Geun-hye and U.S. President Barack Obama are expected to discuss North Korea's provocations and the South Korea-U.S. free trade deal at Friday's summit. Earnest noted that the U.S. and companies there benefit from a successful bilateral FTA. Climate change issues are also likely to be on the agenda. It's the fourth summit between Presidents Park and Obama since the South Korean leader took office in early 2013. The United States has told South Korea that it cannot accept South Korea's request for the transfer of 4 core technologies crucial to Korea's indigenous fighter jet development project. Now, despite the setback, the South Korean military says there are other ways to develop the necessary technology. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Korea's Defense Minister Han Min-gu held talks with his U.S. counterpart Ashton Carter at the Pentagon on Thursday local time and asked them to reconsider Seoul's request of 4 key technology transfers. Han was in Washington accompanying President Park Geun-hye on her official visit to the U.S. Carter said it will be difficult to grant Seoul's request, but that the two countries can explore ways to increase technological cooperation. The two defense chiefs agreed to establish a consultative forum to discuss ways to increase cooperation in defense technology, including the KFX project. Among the 4 technologies, the ASA multipurpose radar and the RF jammers used to disrupt or prevent communication via a broadcasted RF signal have never been transferred outside the U.S. The 4 technologies are critical to the KFX project, which aims to produce 120 fighter jets to replace South Korea's aging fleet of F-4 and F-5s. South Korean military says they have an alternative and emphasized that Korea is capable of developing the ASA radar by the year 2021 and the other 3 technologies by mid-2020. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
The top defense officials of South Korea and Japan will meet in Seoul next Tuesday for talks on bilateral defense policies and security agendas. Seoul's defense ministry said Japan's new security legislation that allows Tokyo to exercise a right to collective self-defense will top the agenda during discussions between Defense Minister Han Min-gu and his Japanese counterpart Gen Nakatani. Now, Korea is concerned, as under these new laws, Japan will be permitted to fight alongside its allies even when not under attack. Nakatani will also attend the Seoul International Aerospace and Defense Exhibition during his 3-day stay in the South Korean capital. It will mark the first time since Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe took office in late 2012 for a Japanese defense minister to visit Seoul. South Korea's Unification Ministry has released the final list of North Korean families who will take part in the upcoming reunions of families separated by the Korean War. The list includes 96 families who will be reunited with 394 South Korean relatives in the first round of these reunions. These will begin on October 20th for a 3-day run at North Korea's Mount Gumgang Resort. The oldest participants from the north are 88 years old. The ministry says one family from the north had to be withdrawn as their South Korean relatives had to cancel due to health issues. On Thursday, South Korean Red Cross officials crossed the border for a final checkup on the event. The second round of reunions within this event will take place from October 24th, also for 3 days, with 90 South Korean families expected to meet their relatives from the north. Now, the hot topic of debate at South Korea's National Assembly continues to be the government's recent decision to introduce a single state-authorized history textbook to secondary schools from 2017. On the last day of Parliament's interpellation session on this Friday, lawmakers have been grilling Prime Minister Hwang KyoAhn on this very issue. Main opposition party lawmakers say the government's move is an attempt to embellish Korea's authoritarian past and to force a historical perspective that favors the ruling Conservative Party. During its regular Friday meeting, the ruling Saenuri Party again reiterated that the government's goal is to create any biased descriptions about North Korea and South Korea's modern history. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy is focusing on outside protests and rallies to garner public support against the government's move. Now, in international news and in a huge policy U-turn, U.S. President Barack Obama says American troops will remain in Afghanistan for the time being to assist with an increasingly fragile security situation there. Son Jung-in has this report.
U.S. President Barack Obama has announced his decision to shift from his earlier pledges to end America's longest war on his watch. Speaking at the White House on Thursday, Obama said the U.S. will maintain its current force of 9,800 troops in Afghanistan through next year and draw down to 5,500 when he leaves office in January 2017. Obama emphasized that the mission remains the same.
Their mission will not change. Our troops will continue to pursue those two narrow tasks that I outlined earlier, training Afghan forces and going after al-Qaeda.
The administration had previously planned to withdraw all U.S. military forces by the end of next year, leaving behind only a small group of embassy-based troops in Kabul. But after months of deliberations with his advisors and Afghanistan's leaders, Obama said they decided to postpone the drawdown because Afghan troops were still not strong enough to beat back a resurgent Taliban and other opposition forces.
The bottom line is, in key areas of the country, the security situation is still very fragile, and in some places, there's risk of deterioration.
This marks the second delay this year. Critics have slammed Obama for entering the White House with a pledge to bring home American troops from two major wars, but instead leaving with U.S. forces engaged in three ongoing conflicts in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. 손정인, Arirang News.
Volkswagen says it will recall millions of vehicles in Europe after the German government forced its hand over the emissions cheating scandal. The situation seems to be getting more toxic by the day for the auto giant, but VW's new CEO says he's confident the company will be back on its feet in the next 2 to 3 years. Shin Se-min reports.
Volkswagen is recalling 8.5 million diesel engine cars in the European Union after the German government demanded the company service the affected vehicles. The announcement came after Germany's automobile regulator demanded that all Volkswagen cars sold with the emissions cheating software be recalled, calling the company's plans insufficient.
We believe around 2.4 million vehicles are affected in Germany, so a large-scale recall is necessary. Volkswagen will take all steps to keep customers informed in Cupertino with the KBA.
Applying the German measures throughout Europe, the car manufacturer said repair and the recall in 28 EU member countries will begin in January of 2016. The company, however, have yet to announce how it'll fix the cars, but faces a deadline set by the German government for technical details of the solution by the end of next month. Volkswagen has indicated for weeks that it intends to fix the cars affected by the faulty software meant to cheat on emissions test. Volkswagen said the company has sold around 11 million cars worldwide, all of which were installed with the software. The company has put aside nearly $7.5 billion to cover the cost of the scandal, but market watchers say the expenses could be more costly. Shares in the company recovered slightly last week, but are still down nearly 20% since the emissions cheating scandal was exposed in mid-September. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, it's not only Volkswagen feeling the heat over recalls. Kia Motors is going to recall almost 420,000 Sorento SUVs in the United States and Canada. The Korean automaker says the cars can be shifted out of park when the driver's foot isn't on the brake, which could cause the vehicle to roll away. According to documents filed by Kia with the U.S. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the recall affects Sorentos from the 2011 through 2013 model years. More than 377,000 vehicles are subject to the recall in the U.S., 42,000 in Canada. The recall is expected to begin from November 24th in the United States and December 1st in Canada. Now, the summer just gone was one to forget for Korea's tourism industry on the whole, at least. The poll by the Korea Culture and Tourism Institute shows nearly 54% of tour businesses saw a decline in business compared to last year. Over 60% of tour agencies, 1 to 3-star hotels, amusement establishments and casinos had quieter summers amid the sluggish economy. Businesses in the recreation sector and luxury hotels were the most content. The latter offered discounts and seasonal packages in August in an effort to recover from the fallout of the MERS outbreak earlier this year. Now, Korea's two biggest game developers, Nexon and NCSoft, are parting ways after 3 years of partnership. Nexon says it will sell its 15.08% majority stake in NCSoft through a block deal later this Friday. U.S. investment firm Morgan Stanley is managing the sale. The shares are expected to sell for between $160 to $170 each. The sell-off comes after a feud erupted between the companies early this year as Nexon attempted to increase its control over the way NCSoft is managed. Well, that's all we have for you for now on this Friday lunchtime here in Seoul. Thank you as always for tuning in, and we will be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Goodbye.